So we were asked just to provide a bit of a presentation for this meeting, along with being able to share with the public what we've been doing since the announcement of reopening of schools. So just a few pictures from some of our schools, and that we're asking that patience and kindness be required this year. We're working through all of the information that we're receiving almost on a daily basis, but the most important message for us right now is to please self-screen before coming into any school or any public building. Okay. So, we were provided direction by Manitoba Education, who is taking their direction from the Chief Public Health Officer. So what we know is that in-class learning resumed on September 8th. K-8 students have returned 5 days a week of in-class instruction. Students from grade 9 to 12 will return for up to 5 days per week of in-class instruction. So we were not able to accommodate 5 days a week, so we have our high school students attending 2 days a week. So they're either in cohort A, which is Monday, Tuesday, and then cohort B is Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday is a school-wide learning day online. Students with special needs in all grades will return for 5 days of in-class instruction, and that's students from K to 12. Teachers and staff returned to schools on September 2nd. So we had orientation for the public health requirements, and then we looked at the educational priorities to support students. We looked at recovery learning, and we started to prepare for the other levels, response levels, just in case we need to move from a yellow to an orange or to a red. And schools need to be prepared for changing the public health conditions and the different response levels. So this is what our document looks like online. I'm hoping that people have had a chance to look online. We have put a lot of information out online from March until now. There has been information for parents, information for educators, the public health measures. We've put out all of them that we've received. So reopening plans for school divisions are posted online. So if you go to education.ca Manitoba, you'll find our district plans, as well as on our own district website. The provincial health measures, so we've been sharing that. The school day structure and learning plans. We have to include the remote learning and technology needs. We have to focus on mental health and well-being. The robust preparedness plan to move to different response levels. We're working on these, and we should have these completed by the weekend. And the reason we need to have these ready to roll is we've been informed that the levels may change, and we'll have a 24 to 48 hour window to work with. So we really need to have our plans in place. Schools are communicating their plans directly to staff, students, and families before school starts. So all parents were informed before school started. What was going on. We started with some staggered starts in our elementary schools, so that's all been communicated. And I have to stress that the plan may look different from each school due to student population, space, and demographics. So because it's happening in Deerwood doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen at Westwood or any of the schools. It depends on the school population, demographics. So when returning to school in September, we informed the province that we would have a staggered start. So our staggered start was last week, and that was to allow time to ensure that we were teaching the new protocols and practices. Really important that we had the time to work with small groups of kids, and also to be able to see what the routine was going to be in the school as far as lining up, using the bathroom, changing classes if classes needed to be changed, but typically we're having teachers change classrooms rather than students. It just lessens the flow of traffic in the hallways. All of our classrooms were configured to support physical distancing, which was 2 meters. 2 meters of physical distancing is required to the greatest extent possible. If we were not able to do that, then we have to ensure that students are wearing masks from grade 4 and up. And then we have cohorts. So our schools have been split into cohorts, and it depends on which school you're at. You may have a cohort of grade 1 and grade 2, depending on the doors that they're using, but we're trying not to have those classes cross at all. So each school will look different. So it's important if you have children in the school to find out which cohorts they belong to. And students can belong to more than one cohort. The reason with the cohort is we're trying to limit exposure to a lot of students, but also if we need to do some contact tracing, or public health has to, then we can identify cohorts of students. Entry and exits to schools will be managed to avoid congestion. Lunch and recess breaks will be staggered, and if you go onto the school website, you'll see what the lunch hour breaks are like. I know at one school the kids are starting at 8:45, the first cohort, and they go right up until 9 o'clock. And teachers are meeting their students at the door to bring them in. Students will be reminded the importance of physical distancing and hand washing. We won't be able to stress this enough. Enhanced cleaning protocols in schools and on buses, and I'll go into that in a few minutes. Students are not to share supplies, masks, food, or drinks. Protocols will be in place to safely move students through schools to reduce congestion in hallways and common areas. Teachers will move across classrooms instead of students where possible. Regional public health officials will monitor the situation closely, and they'll provide direction and information to school communities. Public health will be responsible for responding to cases of COVID-19 and overseeing outbreak management protocols. So we will take our direction from public health. Self-screening tool is to be done daily, and changes to screening criteria will be posted. And we've already seen a change. We had ours posted, and it was pointed out that Terrace Bay, Ontario had been added, so we had to update ours. The original one didn't have the travel restrictions. So as they change, we will change ours. Students and staff are required to self-screen and stay home when they're exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19. Parents and caregivers will be expected to screen their children before boarding the bus or entering a school. It's been pointed out that we do not have school buses, but we do have students who come from Paint Lake on school buses. So that's important that we had that piece. Screening protocols for all people entering a school and limitations regarding visitors. So we haven't opened our schools to the amount of visitors we would normally have. It's very limited. And we're working on the premise that people are coming to school healthy. It's really important to remember. So, hand hygiene. Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. We can't stress that enough. So hand washing with soap and water for at least 20 seconds in the recommended hand hygiene practice. Hand sanitizer will be at all entrances and throughout the school. So even in this building, all of our entrances have the hand sanitizer. Students, staff, and visitors must engage in frequent hand hygiene often at the start of the day and before going home, before and after recess, or being on a bus. After going to the washroom, diaper change, and helping children with washroom routines. After getting hands dirty, or if they've been contaminated. After coughing, sneezing, blowing nose, or handling tissues. After soothing a crying child. After putting on and taking off a mask, and after cleaning tests. Students, especially young children, will need help and reminders. So we have posters and fact sheets available. They're available online, but we also have them throughout the school. And it might seem silly that I have to repeat all of these things, but it's really important that we state them over and over again, because we forget. Physical distancing. This is one of our classrooms at Burntwood School. So 2 meters of physical distancing as much as possible. So we've rearranged spaces to avoid close contact and assigning a designated desk table for each child. So we have seating arrangements manage flow of people in common areas, including hallways, visual prompts like tape on the floor, hoops, mats, or other items that can mark off personal space. One of the areas of concern have been the bathrooms. So those are all marked off, and some schools will have a limit of 2 or 3 kids per bathroom, depending on the size. And you'll find that there's a pylon, 2 pylons, one for the first student, one for the second, and if there's no pylons, that means they have to wait until a pylon comes out. So schools have done a good job of mapping out the process. There's a practice of staggered entrances and exit times. Avoid close greetings. So unfortunately, there's no hugs, no handshakes. Stagger recess and staff breaks, and do not schedule large in-person meetings. Assemblies and gatherings that exceed public health advice may not be scheduled. Physical barriers may be installed for higher traffic areas, and where feasible to maintain infection spread and control. So physical distancing continued, particularly hard with young children and not always practical, so that's where we're asking for patience. Cohorts, group of students, to limit exposure. And a minimum of 1 meter separation when seated at desks or tables is required if they're in a cohort. Groups of students, we're keeping them together and avoiding interaction with other groups, including lunch breaks and recess. And some of our school, I think only one school right now actually has a lunch program that they're able to provide. And the reason they're able to provide that lunch program is because they have the space and they're only allowing students who are out of catchment area to stay, which is our French immersion school, because kids from all over the district attend that school. As the school year progresses, we may be able to add more lunch programs, but right now we're not able to do that. And at the high school, we're asking students to go home at lunchtime. We can't have them coming to the cafeteria or hanging out in common areas. Everybody has to leave the building. So that's a different routine for us. And then we have daily records that include the names of students, staff, and volunteers of cohorts will be needed. So anytime you come into a building, you need to sign in, you need to let us know where you're going, and then you need to sign out. And that's for contact tracing if we need it. Mask requirements. Students in grade 4 and up, teachers, staff, and visitors are required to wear masks when physical distancing of 2 meters is not possible. Younger students can also use non-medical masks. Masks are required for bus drivers, students, and any other passenger in the bus. And again, that's for our students coming in from Paint Lake. Medical masks should be used for symptomatic individuals or while caring for people who are symptomatic, and when providing continuous care or interventions where distancing is not possible. And this protocol will be in place for some of our students who are in our special needs category. Masks are to be provided to students and staff if they do not have their own. So do not stay home if you do not have a mask, because we have masks. Please come to school. But we've asked that they be part of the back to school supply list. And there is a detailed guidance for mask use in schools available on the website. There are exceptions. Children under the age of 2, children under the age of 5, either chronologically or developmentally, who refuse to wear a face covering and cannot be persuaded to do so. People with severe sensory processing disorders, patients with facial deformities, patients with PTSD who are triggered by a face covering, extreme agoraphobia and asphyxia phobia, which is long-standing and predating COVID-19, people with cognitive impairment, intellectual deficiency, or autism spectrum disorder, for who wearing a mask covering will cause severe distress or disorganization, people who are unable to apply or remove a covering without help, and people who are experiencing active breathing difficulties. Remote learning. Periods of time when students are home in isolation or when physical distancing cannot be achieved or cohorts are not possible. So this is our high school. But also when students have been advised to stay home if they're waiting for results of COVID-19 testing or they're sick and they need to stay home, then we provide the remote learning. Changes to the response level as part of the pandemic response system. So I'll explain that in a couple of slides. And then medical accommodations. Parents and caregivers must consult with healthcare provider on the need of an accommodation unless previously identified. So those ones that we know of, because they have been our students for a number of years, we're aware of students who most likely would need that medical accommodations. It's the new ones or students who may have family members who may be immune compromised. And there has been a district medical note that's been developed.
Yes. With that being said, parents, I mean, we just have a standard form. Not to say that we would not accept a doctor's note. It's not like if a parent shows up with a doctor's note and it says their child needs an accommodation for remote learning, you wouldn't say, oh no, you got to use our form. That is fine.
All right. The district will be utilizing either Seesaw or Google Classrooms for learning platforms. When we did the parent survey back in June, we heard from parents there were just too many platforms for them to have to learn for their students, so we've gone with just the two. There will be alternative methods of course delivery for those who require it, so if we have students who cannot get onto the internet, we'll make sure that there's still programming available for students. And parent tutorials are being linked to school websites for the Seesaw and the Google Classroom. I know that for parents they had to learn that last time around, so we're going to try and make it easier for them. Enhanced cleaning. This is the bathroom. It's occupied bathroom one. So disinfect commonly touched surfaces frequently, at least twice daily, or more often as needed. So we do have daytime cleaners now in the school, something we didn't have before. So that is their role, and they have a checklist, so it's just a constant going through the school, making sure that these things are happening. We've provided all teachers with disinfectant for their classrooms that they can mist their tables and then just let them dry. In the office, you'll find disinfectant by the photocopying machine, any high-touch areas where teachers just need to, give it a clean also. Hand sanitizer at all entrances and in classrooms. The in-classroom hand sanitizer may not necessarily be alcohol-based. It may be the peroxide-based, but that's acceptable also. And some of our teachers are lucky they have sinks in their classrooms, so we have that also. The increased monitoring of hand cleaning supplies to ensure an ample supply at all sinks and washrooms and kitchen areas, and also I should say at entrances that they never run out. Ensure washrooms and lunchrooms are clean, disinfected frequently, at least twice a day. Our water fountains are off, except for the touchless, the refill stations are being used. And the daytime staff to ensure that enhanced cleaning protocols are happening. If a student gets sick at school, so they're going to be isolated in a separate area. So the sick rooms in the schools, the nurses' rooms have been identified as rooms for students there to be 2 meters away from others. They have to have a medical mask, and extra vigilant hand hygiene is required. Immediate notification to caregivers is going to happen, so it's really, really important that caregivers provide up-to-date phone numbers, emergency contacts, and that they're available to come and pick up their students immediately. I know in the past, parents have said, well, can you keep them till noon? Can you keep them till, for a specific amount of time? We're asking that somebody pick up the student right away. Ask the parent or guardian to contact Health Links. So Health Links is going to provide direction for parents' questions, A sick child can return to the school once it has been determined that it is safe to do so by their health care provider or public health. And then additional environmental cleaning will be required in high-touch areas where the student was being isolated. So questions and answers. Will there be gym, music, elective, junior high classes at R.D. Parker? Yes, both are vital for students' mental health and well-being. Physical distancing and modifications to regular programming will happen. Changes to delivery and regular equipment. Does that say disinfestation? I think it should be disinfecting. Choir classes will continue. 2.4 meters between singers and masks to be worn. HEPA filter system is in the Letterman Theater. So the 2.4 meters, I believe, is 8 feet. They've extended the distance. Band will continue with modifications, physical distancing and practice rotation. Students will not be changing for phys ed, which students have been really happy about, but we can't have students in the change rooms because we can't make sure that the physical distancing is happening. So pack deodorant. Outdoor gym classes, and all classes are being encouraged to occur outside. Lockers will not be used in the hallways, so they've all been shut, except for there's a few classrooms that have their lockers right in the classroom, and the teacher can actually monitor those. Right now we're offering all of our elective classes at R.D. Parker, including our junior high classes. Students have been put back into cohorts for the junior high classes. No longer do we have the mixing of classes, which used to be part of our transition plan. That's not happening. They're now going with their cohort from their school. Mental health and well-being support. School counselors are only a phone call away or an email away. Also, there's links available on all of our websites, so please do not hesitate to reach out. There are resources for students, caregivers, and helpline information. And I just added the kids helpline and the mobile crisis service for youth in Thompson. Those are the probably two most requested. And mental health and well-being will be a focus in all of our schools. Some of the programs are going to be, and there'll be a continuation of some of the programs. We have Virtues, Reaching Out, Speak Up, Healthy Youth Relationships, 7 Healthy Habits of Kids, Be Safe, the Thrival Kids, Internet Safety, and there's a few other programs. So the Restarting Pandemic Response System, that was that thick document that came out about 3 weeks ago. And in that, it provides the sectors and then what happens at each level. So for us as schools, level green, everything is open, it's normal routine. Level yellow caution, that's where we are right now. So it's open with occupancy cohorts required and physical distancing. If we go into level orange restricted, it will be in class for grades kindergarten to grade 8 and remote for grades 9 to 12. And with that in class grades K to 8, the physical distancing requirements are going to become greater. So we're going to have to space out students farther apart. So that's probably going to mean that there's going to be adjustments in classrooms. And then if we go into level red critical, that is closed for all students except for K to 6 essential workers, students, kids. So, and there's actually just a question in now if they're going to include special needs students, also K to 12, in that category. Lots of videos that we have put on our website, that we've shared, that our teachers have used as part of their welcome back to school. How to take on and off a mask, why masks are important, how to wash your hands. There's some for senior years, there's some for early years, signage, all sorts of things. So there's a wealth of information, and we've been sharing the information all along. Best website to look at for any information would be the Education gov.mb.ca that has everything, including the regular updates. And
Will you operate that for me?
Sure.
So I don't have to
Okay.
cross-contaminate. Okay. There was a staff information for schools. It was a document that was put out through MLake. So along with lots of parents having anxiety, obviously, about their children going back to schools and the safety issues that come with that, we also had some teachers who had some significant questions. Rather than bog down this massive document and put it online to parents, I developed one just for staff. Sub-teachers. So very early on in this process, I had to try to get my head around the fact that we have upwards of 80 people on our sub-list who at any given time in 1 week can go up to 6 or 7 different schools. There's obviously a safety issue, and contact tracing would have been very difficult. So what I proposed was to limit the movement of these sub-teachers throughout the schools. We did district full-time substitute teachers were hired. The information from SIMS, which is our data management system, essentially was gathered. And what I did is I looked at the amount of same-day sick absences at each school. So these are your absences where a teacher gets up in the morning and phones in and says, I'm not well. On average, how many times during any given day does that happen? So based on this information, I found out that I needed to hire 6 full-time substitute teachers. So it was an average of about 2 per school. So I looked over 2 years, with the exception of 3 going to both Wapanuck and Artie Parker, both being bigger schools in population as well as teaching staff. So what I did is, 2 full-time term substitute teachers were hired for each school. So you'd have 2 people that would show up at Westwood, and they would show up there every day, and then if there was a teacher absent, they would fill that class. I also took the schools and I twinned them to cover off if required. For example, if Artie Parker and Riverside are they're twin schools, their full-time subs could move in between the schools. Perhaps one day at Riverside you have 4 teachers out. And I am really, really suspecting that our level of absenteeism is going to be significantly higher this year, with people really us promoting, do not come to work if you are not well, if you are sneezing, coughing, all of those things. So for example, Artie Parker, Riverside has 3 people out and they only have the 2 subs. But Parker's only got 1 person out and they have 2 extra subs. Those sub-teachers that were hired for Parker could also go to Riverside and vice versa. So this way, when you're looking at a contract trace situation, those 4 people, or in this case 6 people, have only gone between 2 schools. Okay, is that clear? Yeah. And that's kind of how we've worked it thus far. So, district directives. So some staff, both teaching and non-teaching assignments, will need to change temporarily to accommodate smaller groupings of supervision and support. The distinction between the roles and responsibilities of support staff and professional staff have not changed. The following applies to engaging support staff in working with students. Support staff may have an increased responsibility of supervision. They may say, okay, this class was too large. 10 of these children need to work in an alternate setting. The teacher would program, do all of that, and then simply give the programming for the EA to deliver. No planning, preparation, evaluation, all of those things. That is not the responsibility of support staff. They will be available to support where needed. Support staff will communicate student progress to the assigned teacher, but they are not responsible for communicating any type of student progress to parents. That is the role of the teacher. Any questions regarding that? No? Okay. Contact tracing for staff and students that report a positive test for COVID. Public health will notify the school principal and the superintendents and provide direction. If the principal is the first one notified, they will immediately notify either myself or Lori. Myself and Lori and the school administration will work with public health to give direction. Any information about positive cases will be communicated through public health, not through the school district of Mystery Lake. Health information is considered private, therefore information regarding positive cases will not be shared publicly. There's a chance, and I believe public health is going to refrain from using or telling us who even the student may be. And I know that, I mean, parents may want that information, you know, was it this kid in my child's classroom, or the staff member, the teacher may even want to know that information. I caution, public health or health information is a very private thing, and there are rules around giving out people's health information. The other thing I caution is, if this information is getting out and people are finding out specific people's names about who's tested positive, we're already seeing this. There are stigmas with people testing positive. And if that's going to be the situation and people are going to have all of this information, you're going to see that people aren't going to want to get tested, and we will never get ahead of this thing if people are refraining from getting tested because they don't want the stigma if they do end up testing positive and fear that somebody will find out who they are. So again, their health information of the people who test positive within a school setting will not be shared. It's a small community. Chances are that people may be able to put 2 and 2 together with regards to, you know, who it may be in a kid's class. However, we will not divulge that information, nor a staff member won't be privy to that, parents won't be privy to that information. Okay, just to clarify. Facilitating contact tracing, schools must record students' attendance accurately. If we are in a situation where we need to contact trace, we need to know who was in the building. Maintain a log of visitors, including district staff. Keep groups of students together, i.e. cohorts, to the greatest degree possible. Upon request by public health officials, school must provide contact information of staff or students who have been considered to be close contacts. So we need to be very cooperative with public health in return in exchanging information. Public health is responsible for communicating with close contacts. That will not be something we will embark on. And schools must not communicate this information without specific direction from the superintendents. Okay? We did reviewing emergency preparedness with regards to fire drills. In the context of COVID-19, the requirement of 10 fire drills, so in the Public Schools Act, it states that each school must conduct 10 fire drills within a school year. School divisions can alternate these measures, but they must still happen, all 10 of them. So such as fire drills can be done one class at a time or on different days. Generally, the pretty standard practice is we pull the buzzer, everybody leaves the building, everybody returns. Obviously, because of crowding and not wanting to cross cohorts, that we have to do things a little differently. If you don't do the evacuation drill due to public health, then you must provide verbal instructions on the students of how and where and what needs to be done during the fire drill. Schools can engage in staggered times for each cohort to perform these drills and reduce congestion. Obviously, I don't think we're going to ring the fire drill 15 times a day, so 15 different cohorts can practice, but they will come up with something creative, I'm sure, at the school level. Sometimes we use a handbell. Muster points should be spread out and staggered re-entering of the building is needed. So a muster point is essentially where your classroom goes and gathers outside and then is accounted for before the fire drill. So, lockdowns. For lockdowns during the COVID-19 pandemic, drills and preparedness need to continue following the guidelines of school district administrative procedures using the modifications that encompass the public health measures. So, set a training time, about 15 minutes. Use school-specific floor plans. Display floor plans on a smart board or an overhead or etc. Discussions should be done that are grade and age appropriate when you're talking about a lockdown, because generally lockdowns are initiated in the event that we have an intruder in the building. Review division lockdown procedures and policies. Educate students on visitors and access control. Scenario discussions. Discuss with the view from a current and different locations in light of something, if there was a lockdown to happen. And discuss different types of incidents, i.e. intruder in the school, i.e. intruder outside of the building. What they have told us in terms of these, in the event that it is a real lockdown, I mean, keeping COVID in mind, you kind of have to err on the side of caution. So for example, many times during the lockdown, we trained students to, this would be the line of sight for an intruder. You would go to the farthest corner out of the line of sight and muster together, get on the ground and stay close and stay quiet. I mean, in the event that it was a real drill, we would do exactly that. The risk of something like that happening over the risk of a transmission of COVID-19, this certainly outweighs that. So we would do exactly what we were trained to do in that event. Oh, Lori's gone over this. Or did you go? Yeah, students. Staff members coming back to school, if a staff member becomes sick at school, or if it's a volunteer, they become symptomatic, they should immediately isolate themselves from the other staff and children, notify their supervisor, and go home and isolate. Call health links. And then again, additional environmental cleaning would occur. Focus should be on high-touch areas and areas where they spent some time, where the staff or the visitor was. Okay?